All right, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins, you have the floor.
Good morning. Okay, good morning again. Welcome. And I welcome all of you to the CIP planning workshop for the Pitt County. And I call the Pitt County Commissioners CIP planning workshop to order. Madam Clerk.
Good morning. Yes. Chairwoman Floyd Huggins.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Albright.
Yes.
Commissioner Colson.
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Here.
Everyone is present with the exception of Commissioner White.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner White from today's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we excuse Commissioner White. Madam Clerk.
Chairwoman Floyd Huggins.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Albright.
Yes.
Commissioner Colson.
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you again, Madam Clerk. At this time, we will have the purpose from County Manager Scott Elliott.
Thank you, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins. Well, welcome to the CIP workshop, our capital improvement workshop for the planning for fiscal year 21-22. This workshop is really the first formal building block with the Board of Commissioners toward developing the new budget for July 1, again for 2021-2022. Obviously, this format is in Zoom, so it's a little bit different. Normally, we're down in the EOC, staff is kind of together, and we're can kind of look at each other and eyeball what we're doing. But obviously, we're in a virtual environment, so we are going to make it virtual and go through this workshop virtually. So the format of this is really pretty much identical to what we've done in years past. In terms of the purpose, you've got two things. You've got a PowerPoint, a printed PowerPoint, and you also have the printed notebook. The printed notebook has all the information that is in the PowerPoint as well. The notebook has an index page by page with information, and maybe even it's larger information via compared to what's in the PowerPoint with tables, so you can read it a little bit clearer. But in terms of the purpose, the goal today, or the agenda, is to discuss and adopt one thing being the county's mission, vision, values, and goals statement for the new year. This is the statement that is in the current year for 2021. We're also going to do a review of the budget drivers as we see them right now in the budget outlook to July 1. And then most importantly is to review and discuss the capital planning needs of Pitt County and those major institutions that we are responsible for funding, being outside institutions, being the community college and the Pitt County school system. So moving on to our review of the mission, vision, values, and goals. Basically, we need to have a review of this and then just ask the board either to make suggestions to amend these statements or to reaffirm them and adopt them so we can set them forth as the foundation toward building the budget for coming before you in the budget workshops. Then that will be eventually, hopefully, adopted by you for the new year beginning July 1. So our mission statement, as you can see on the bottom of page 2 of the PowerPoint printout, and I think we should be displaying this on the screen as well. I assume Brian or our PO office should have that up there.
Brian, you should see a share screen function at the bottom of your screen.
Here we go.
My thing done something.
Okay, so there we go. So if we can move on to the next slide. And next slide, there we go. All right, so the mission of Pitt County government is to enhance the health, safety, well-being of our community by advocating for and providing quality services in a friendly and cost-effective manner. This mission statement has served the organization for many years and has really been the foundation of what we do and one of our guiding principles. So if we can move on to next.
Yeah.
Unless there's any comments on the mission statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to know if we can add to everyone.
I'm sorry, what do you want to add?
To everyone.
So I guess you could say add it into the health, safety, and well-being for everyone in our community by advocating?
No, at the very end. At the very end. To everyone. With such a play of words and everything else in national media, become a little paranoid, I guess, but to everyone would be good.
Do we need a, Mr. Manager, do we need a motion on?
Yes, you'll need a motion and then a second and then a vote if you're going to change your mission statement.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to add at the end of the sentence, to everyone. I offer that as a motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Any hands up or any, I don't see it.
Yeah, because I can't see it.
I can't either.
So,
With the screen share, we can't see if there's hands up. PAO
Scott,
office, if you can help us.
at this time.
Pardon me?
okay, so it dies without for lack of a second?
Okay. All right, so then moving on. And can I just make a comment on the mission statement? I think when it says the well-being of our community, it could be implied that when we say our community, that's the community as a whole. So I just wanted to make a comment. I believe that the mission statement implies that. It may not say to everyone directly, but it does imply that. So next slide on the vision, a leader in the state, best in the East. And again, that is the vision statement that has served us for several decades and is another one of our core principles in terms of how we see ourselves. And we try to be that leader in the state and the best in the East to the best of our ability and resources. And I believe we've done a very good job of that. Any no comments on that, I assume. On values, we have the following value statements. We say that we believe that government believes our purpose is public service. Thus, we adhere to the following. They encourage honest behavior that is consistent with our mission, recognize and promote competence, excellence, and open communication, support each other in working toward our goals, maintain an open government that is a good steward of public resources, support decision-making that is deliberate, conscientious, and based on fact. So again, our value statements. Excuse me, the priorities are based on these type of building blocks. You've got this is an illustration. The next slide will go into actual expanded wording in these, but education is the top building block of a priority. Then second is public safety. Third is economic development, human services, facility and space needs, infrastructure improvements, and recreational activities. So these are all priorities of the board as discussed and adopted in the past. So then to build upon that, the statements that go with each of these, the first one, education, to ensure quality education. Second one being public safety, to ensure community safety through enhanced emergency service programs. Next one, economic development, to advance economic development opportunities for Pitt County. Next one, human services, to enrich the quality of life for Pitt County citizens through opportunities for improved health, welfare, and environmental concerns. Then on capital improvements, to address the facility and space needs of all county government programs, general government, public schools, and community college. The next, capital improvements again, to champion infrastructure improvements throughout the county. And then we have cultural and recreational, to support the provision of and access to recreational activities for county citizens. So with that, that is your mission, vision, values, and goals. And we would like the board's consideration to hopefully maybe have a motion to reaffirm those so we can adopt those into the budget planning process that we are embarking upon at this moment with all the departments.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this review and as we have reaffirmed the mission and the vision and the vision and goals.
thank you. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Okay. Are you about to say something, Scott?
No, ma'am.
Okay. It's been moved and second that we reaffirm the mission statement, vision, value, and goals for 21-22. These are very important. So, Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Before roll call, I didn't mean to interrupt. I believe you may have a hand up on your participant list. I don't know if you wanted any discussion.
Okay, I can't see in the hand, so.
If I click on my participant list on the bottom, it looks like Commissioner McLaughlin has his hand up.
Okay, Commissioner McLaughlin, do you want to make a statement or were you trying to make a second? Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, I was going to make a second.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Chairwoman Floyd Huggins,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Albright,
Yes.
Commissioner Colson,
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Yes, ma'am. And if I can ask Janice, if you and the other staff will continue to monitor the hands up. I think all the chair and I are seeing are the person speaking and then the main screen with the PowerPoint
Right.
on it. So that'd help us if you let us know their hands up for questions or
That's
unless
all.
somebody just speaks up.
I will.
All right, in terms of budget planning, if we can move to the next slide. So for the upcoming spring calendar, we talked about the remaining budget calendar because technically we kicked this process off with the departments back in the fall, late fall, I think it's October, when we sent out the request for capital needs for them to do all their documentation. That builds up to this workshop. We basically start the process over every year. Internally, this whole package of projects is reviewed by management team in much detail through numerous meetings until we finally get to this presentation time before you. So it's to let you know that there's been a lot of preparation just to bring this package to you each year at this point in time. But in terms of what's left on the remaining budget calendar as we march toward the spring and then the adoption of the budget, hopefully in June, you have today's workshop, you have March 5th, we will have all the budget requests from the departments will be due. Those packages will be going out in the very near future. Then March 5th through the 26th, we have what we call budget compilation and balancing. That's done by finance internally, where they basically put all the pieces of the puzzle together, all the from the expenditure side to the revenue side, find out how far out of balance we are, and we are always out of balance because there's always so much more in demand, in need that is documented compared to the available resources. The 29th through April 9th, and we have the department heads and outside agencies come in, confer with me, Brian Barnett, and Denise and Kelly in terms of a budget conference to better fully understand what they've put in their budget, why they're asking for it, what their justification is, and then trying to figure out how we make that piece of the puzzle fit the bigger piece of the puzzle in terms of having our overall revenues meet those expenditures, or basically telling them why something cannot be funded at a certain point in time and may have to be deferred. We then have from on April 30th, revised budget requests submitted to the departments for review. So we send them back once the budget conferences are done, send them back an indication as to what my recommendation will be to you as a board of commissioners, gives them one last chance to come back before me or Brian and ask for reconsideration or ask for an explanation before it's actually then becomes on the May 3rd date, the next day, my recommended budget and budget message that I present to you. And at that point in time, we, the staff, bring before you what we call a balanced budget. Absolutely. If I wouldn't bring a balanced budget, then we would be starting the process off kilter and not having the revenues meet the expenditures. May 4th through the 6th, we'll have the budget workshops with you to allow us the time to present and review the recommended budget before you with all the planned expenditures, the anticipated revenues, and the whole budget picture. So that is the week of May the 4th. We always hold the second week of May the 10th, or that second week following the first week, May 10th through 14th, open for additional workshops. Those have been rarely, if ever, needed. We may have once have went into a second week, but for the most part, we were able to hear from you, understand whether you are in agreement to the recommended budget, where the tweaks should be made, and bring it back. A lot of times we'll bring this back to you in a regular meeting rather than actually coming back for another workshop. Right now we have the June 8th date on the calendar, which is scheduled for the public hearing. And that is normally, I think it used to be at 7. We may have switched that to 6 o'clock on that time, but it will be on June the 8th, the evening, June the 8th. And then we have an alternative date to that in case you were not to, sometimes if there's limited or no public comment, you have that option of adopting the budget that night. If there is public comment, you can still adopt it. But if you decided to defer the budget adoption, you could then wait until June the 21st to consider adopting it. The important thing is that you adopt it before July 1 to be in compliance with state statute. So with all that said, we'll move on unless there's any questions on the budget calendar. Are there any hands up for Janice?
I'm sorry, no hands up.
Okay, thank you. All right, in terms of budget drivers, probably none of this really comes as much a surprise, but the COVID impact. So right now we are looking at instability in sales tax revenues. It's up, it's down, it's for the most part, to be truthful, in this current fiscal year, we have done pretty well. We really have not taken a large hit on sales tax. We really thought going into this with the lockdown and so forth, the stay-at-home orders, we really thought that sales tax, which is one of our probably number 2 revenue source within the general fund, was really going to take some hits. We really didn't, when we did our projections in the new year, we really held things flat, didn't go for much growth. But we've, I think as of maybe last month, Brian, we were maybe just a couple $100,000 down, and that's out of I don't know, it's off my head, $23 million revenue source. So we're really tracking pretty well on sales tax revenues. In terms of interest earnings, negligible, just due to what the interest earning environment is yielding out there. 10 years ago, we were probably earning 4% or greater right now, which yielded in probably close to, at one point we were yielding a penny on the tax rate in terms of actual investment earnings on the tax dollars that came in until they had to be expended out either for debt service or for payroll and such. But right now we're earning probably less than 1/4%, less than 1/4% on investment earnings. It's just the nature of the investment environment right now. The health of the workforce with COVID, as you remember, the federal government required us to offer 2 weeks of emergency bonus leave last year that would expire technically on December 30th or 31st. You as a Board of Commissioners said that if an employee had not used those by the end of the year, that they could be continued on into this current year and be used for COVID or non-COVID purposes. I think probably about a third of our workforce has pulled those hours down, had to use those either for any number of COVID considerations, even either the employee getting COVID, having to quarantine because they may have COVID, had childcare issues, so on and so forth. As we move forward, that one is still something we're wrangling with. I know health has had health department, sheriff, and all the departments I think have had issues of employees needing to be out, quarantined, recovering from being sick. Probably more effect in some areas than others, just depending upon on the operation. Another budget driver is the effects of the deferred capital projects from a year ago. So a year ago, when we sat in the workshop in the EOC, discussed all the capital projects, we had a lot of projects on the agenda on the CIP, i.e., such as the Sheriff's Administration Building. That was a project that we were going to move forward on in July 1 of last year. Then COVID hit. By the time we got into March and then April and May, we realized we didn't really know where we were going in terms of overall revenues. So a lot of the projects we then brought back to you in the budget process and said, we really feel like we need to defer these a year until, say, now, because we didn't want to embark upon a bunch of projects, then find out that our revenues would not be sufficient to meet the debt service on those costs, or whether they're coming from fund balance or sales tax or not. So a lot of those projects are kind of being brought back for your consideration now, a year later, that we put off due to COVID. Next driver is one you see year to year, trying to maintain the current levels of service. Our fund balance levels and utilization, we're doing good there. We are maintaining a fund balance within your stated goal, and I think you'll see some good news on that when we come back on February the 15th with the audit from June 30th of 2020 in terms of the audit presentation and where fund balance is at that point in time. So being in the middle of a pandemic, we are strong financially. I would say on the property sales tax collections, we're good on sales tax collections. We're good on your fund balance percentage and utilization. So it's still a budget driver, because if that is spent down, it then means that at times like we have now, if, let's say for instance, for the vaccine administration to vaccinate people, if we had to depend upon fund balance entirely, we could do that. And at some point we actually may be doing that, depending upon the response from the federal government in terms of providing dollars for this cost, because right now there are no dollars for that, i.e. that's one good reason to have a good strong fund balance for such cases like that, as well as hurricanes and so forth. Another budget driver you can hear more about later on will be the school capital needs and county funded school personnel needs. The school capital needs is the one that the county statutorily is mandated to provide for the brick and mortar construction of both the community college and Pitt County schools. The personnel, in terms of supplements, that's not mandated. That's more of an optional. But I think you're going to hear today is about capital needs. I'm sure you'll hear come the springtime on the personnel needs from the school system. The next budget driver, the national economy, just as we all monitor with a new president and administration in place to see where things go. In that respect, we'll be making budget recommendations based upon reading that and looking at how stable we think things are moving forward and so forth. And the last one is your unknown. We don't know with I mean, COVID seems to be ever evolving with the different various strains that we are now hearing about, the more aggressive coronavirus strains. I really wish we had the original strain, we had that vaccine that was being given to people and we were coming out of it, but we still have this unknown, not really knowing where it's headed in the big picture. So those are the budget impacts that we are facing. In terms of fund balance impacts, credit rating is the most important. We are going to be going before the 3 major credit bureau ratings in New York. I think it's in maybe February, March, and we will have to do a formal presentation for each of those in order to have our credit rating hopefully reaffirmed by them. That credit rating then will determine the amount of interest rate that we pay on all of our debt. And if you're paying 20, 25 years on debt, obviously you want to have the lowest interest rate that you can get, so it's cost effective. So interest rate on future debt is alluded to that. Cash flow, alluded to that earlier about needing that for emergency situations, whether it be hurricanes, whether pandemics such as the coronavirus and so forth. The fund balance is needed for stability, investment income, and then cash for emergencies. Again, this kind of all flows with what I've already stated. All right, so before we move into the next part of the workshop, which will be, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, wanted to ask Chairwoman Lloyd Huggins if there's any questions on what I've presented so far in this workshop.
No, I don't have any question, Scott. And Janice, do we have any raised hands?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on.
All right, I will jump in and start the capital improvement process. As I'm moving through this, I can't see the raised hands either, so we're going to do it old school. So if you will just, I can, with my 2 screens, I can actually see you all and the presentation at the same time. So if anyone does have a question, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, just jump in. We do have staff on the call, and staff are primarily going to be here if you have a very specific question about a project. But for the most part, the project discussion, I'm going to kind of go through. So with our capital improvement process, these are all items that are $100,000 or more. I know in our heads, when we hear the word capital, there's other items that come to mind, but if they don't quite meet that $100,000 threshold, it's not part of this particular process, and it's going to be captured more in the budget process in March. We do put them all together and for our list. And our list really gets revised and reviewed several times before we get to today with my staff, Kelly and Denise, Tim Corley on the engineering side, and then we bring in management team. So we have at least 3 sit downs before we get to what you see today and putting our list together. As part of the process, we review it here in January, and then we touch on it again in May. And then the final CIP for this year is adopted as part of the budget. One thing I always want to point out, because I always run into this process or run into this conversation during the budget process. You all today hopefully will adopt the CIP in general, but ultimately the CIP comes down to funding, which is adopted in June. So an item may make the CIP today, it may make it at a certain amount today, but as we go through the budget process in June, we may have to defer it, or we may have to reduce the amount that we have in the CIP. So this is really the starting gate of the projects. It's not the final gate until we get to the budget approval. And even in some cases, there will be specific approvals that will have to be approved by you all as a board before we can start a project down the road. So on our recommended projects, I'll cut to the chase for the most part, which is part of our review. And I think just doing this enough times with our departments, there's pretty much all of our projects from a management team, from an engineering standpoint, we are recommending. We're still going to go through them all. There's one project at the very end that you will see. It's It's kind of recommended, it's kind of not. It's in an unusual place dealing with the animal shelter, but we'll go into all that. So the first list that we have here is our general government and public safety. And what I'm actually going to do is later in the presentation, there's actually a breakdown of all of our projects. So I'm actually going to hit on each individual project then, but this just gives you an overview of what's just in the upcoming 21-22 list of projects. The second part of that grouping, public safety, continues. You can see overall on our environmental, economic and physical development, our human services projects. On the education list here, these are the county funded capital projects. You will get a full-on presentation from Pitt County Schools and Pitt Community College that will go into further detail. That will be larger numbers than this, but this is our capital 1, 2, and 3 that we fund each year as part of the budget. They're going to give you more detail about the specific projects that we typically fund outside of the general fund that do have larger dollar amounts. And then finally, economic development, which is primarily solid waste. So in all, for just 21-22, we're looking at about $6,293,159,000 in projects. So you should have your binder with you, and the binders pretty much follow along with the presentation if you want to read more in detail or want to make notes about any particular project. But I'm just going to start at the very top with general government. Everything that is 21-22 will be highlighted with the yellow column. We always include the future years so you can see that your upcoming obligations for projects, or if they're a project that is an annual project like our first one, which is our annual vehicle replacement project. 21-22 will be our cash funded year. Historically, we have gone 2 years. It's a 3-year cycle, with the first 2 years being that we go out and we get a small loan for vehicles. And then our third year is the cash funded year. In this case, it's $150,000 for next year. If you look out into future years, you will see that the loan year do escalate when we start our next cycle, and our next cash funded year, which is 24-25, does increase from $150,000 to $200,000 on our vehicle loans, vehicles. As part of the process, we meet with all of our departments. They meet with John Demery to come up with their list of what's priority and that would like to be replaced. And then once we get into the fiscal year, we go out and we try to get the best price, which is typically on state contract for our vehicles. Our next project is our facility maintenance. This is another one of those annual ongoing projects that we have. Obviously, you've been in our facilities, whether they were new or old, they always need some type of love. In this case, for 21-22, it was $210,000. This is primarily going to be additional roof repair, HVAC, and carpet replacement. This is one of those projects that typically through the budget process in the spring, we do tend to tweak these numbers around depending on maybe there's enough money left over this year for a project that we can go ahead and knock out. So that number, that 210 may come down, or the 210,000 may come down because simply put, we just don't have enough funding in place to fund everything that we'd like to see in our CIP. Going into future years, this number is pretty consistent across the board, 300, 300, 275, and 275. But these are our ongoing facility needs. Oops, I jumped one, sorry. Our next project is our $100,000 that we have put in for building safety. Our risk manager, Chris Barnes, has an ongoing list of projects, and the $100,000 is going to be used primarily for access points, cameras, or any other safety needs that may come up. This is a continuation of some prior year larger projects. That's why at this point we don't have anything in future years, but I would anticipate when we get to next year's CIP, we will still have some safety needs. So I would anticipate over the next 5 years, a couple of those years, we'll have some more projects.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
on the one before that, the Pitt County Office Building renovation study, you may have skipped that one. There's $100,000 in there. And that is to do an evaluation of the Pitt County Office Building in terms of to see, is it cost effective to renovate this building or to look at other options? We had a lot of detailed discussion last year in the CIP workshop. And this is one of those projects that we were going to do in the current fiscal year, but again, due to the COVID concerns on revenues and so forth, we pushed this off. So we're back a year later. So the concept on this is to study this building, see if we can, how cost effective and efficient it would be to stay in this building, renovate it, or would the study yield we need to do something else, whether on the site, whether in Uptown, or whether north of the river at the office park. There's a number of options, but just wanted to point that one out.
So Scott, so where are we at in this study?
Well, again, it was not included. We were supposed to do it pre-COVID when we were developing the budget. COVID came. This is one of those projects, just like the Sheriff's Office Administration Building. We had $250,000 that was planned for a programming and design study. That got pushed, just like this got pushed, because we didn't feel like we were confident in the revenues coming in to pay for them. So we would begin this July. We'd put this in the budget, assuming you adopt it, you agree with it. We begin the study process in the July 1 year coming up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I did get ahead of myself. I skipped that one and had jumped to the security improvements. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to the Uptown department relocation. This is a study to look at the space that may be vacated in the courthouse as we move forward with the sheriff's administrative building. We want to make sure that we are able to utilize that freed up space in a most efficient manner. So very similar to the study that for the county office building, this $200,000 would be in conjunction with moving forward with the sheriff's administration building to see how we can use that space that is vacated by the sheriff's staff once they're in their own facilities. And then finally, in general government, our last project, this is a project from our MIS folks to upgrade our phone system. Our phone system is from 2002. We've been able to upgrade and patch it along as we go, but this would be a complete overhaul. We have about 800 end users. And from a funding standpoint, you may notice on the screen where it says BL or other. We are looking at potentially combining this project with another software project that we're going to talk about down the road in inspections to be able to kind of go at the same time from a bank loan standpoint, very similar to how we do at our vehicle replacements. So before we leave general government, are there any questions about those particular projects? Seeing none, we will move to public safety. So our first project in public safety is the replacement of our dog kennels at the animal shelter. This particular project is kind of an area at the shelter that we had hoped to hit on as part of the renovation project. It's an area of concern because we have been given a pass by our state inspector. We have some issues with the cages there. And they were kind of giving us leeway because we were doing the renovation project, and they're still working with us since the project's kind of put on hold. Our plan right now is to hopefully combine this with the RFP that we're putting out moving forward, and to be able to kind of knock this project out while we're finishing up the renovations. Our next project is our EMS capital replacement. This is a standard project. Standard placement of money that we put in the EMS fund every year. This can help with vehicles, this can help with equipment, but basically at this point in time, We don't necessarily have any particular set capital items, but we review those as part of the annual budget with the EMS Oversight Committee. Randy Gentry and his folks will put together a list of primarily it's going to be vehicles for replacement, and the Oversight Committee will determine if it's appropriate time to go ahead and replace those vehicles. The third project is the Sheriff's Administration Building. This is one of those projects that we did push off last year due to the fact that we didn't understand exactly the impact of COVID and what it was going to have on our revenues. The first year, 21-22 is a planning year. We will be looking to use that $250,000 to do our planning, engineering, or any other type of study work, with 22-23 being the year, if everything falls in line, that we would be looking to do any type of construction. That will probably be a multiple year time frame, and once we turn over some dirt. But it is our intention as we move into the spring budget process to move this project along, because we know it was a high priority last year. We just ran up against COVID. Our fourth project is the replacement of radios at the Sheriff's Office. Several of the Sheriff's Department's radios at the end of December of 2019 reached their end of life, which means that it's going to be very difficult at all to replace them, to upgrade them. So we would like to move forward with replacing those with some newer models that will thus extend the use of those for a longer period of time. This is pretty standard in the public safety world. Any technology that they have will eventually, the life will turn over and they will have to be replaced. So we're looking to go ahead and knock out quite a few of them in this upcoming budget. This is a particular item that on its own probably does not make the CIP threshold, but once you loop in as many as they're going to need, it doesn't take long to reach 120,000, thus making it a CIP item. And then our fifth project on this list is an unmanned aircraft, or better known as a drone. This will allow the Sheriff's Department greater ability during large-scale events, as we've seen recently with a lot of the public displays that we had over the last year or so. A device like this will come in great handy with the Sheriff's Department to be able to crowd control, to keep an eye on folks, and that type of stuff. Next is our air handlers at the detention center. This is one of our multiple year projects. This would be the third and final addition to replace all the air handling units at the detention center. We've been trying to do one a year, and this will be the final one in that process. Facility improvements at the detention center. This is kind of a new item, but not new. We decided as a management team to treat this one very much like we treat our county office building facility improvements. Instead of looking at individual projects each year, we decided it may be more appropriate to just set an amount every year, just like we do at our building facility here, and then allow the folks at the detention center, they have their own maintenance and facility staff determine the best route for that funding. So what we've done is just went ahead and set up right now as a starting point, $100,000 a year. And then we will probably evaluate this amount during the budget process. So I would imagine some years it'll be a little more than 100 and some years it'll be a little bit less, but we felt like they know the facilities better, and to just go ahead and set up, an annual funding stream just makes more sense from a management side. And then the last two projects on the public safety side are the replacement of boilers and chillers. We have tentatively scheduled those kind of in a way to take up the CIP spot of the air handling units as we move forward. But we're looking at the boilers in 22-23 and then the chillers in 23-24. The boilers are going to help to replace some 30-year-old models. And I believe the chillers, the chiller in 23, 24 will actually help with redundancy and will provide a backup. So instead of running 2, we can run 3, which would be more cost efficient. And also if one of the first 2 happen to go down, then we don't miss a beat by having the 3rd chiller in place. So that is our public safety list. Any questions on public safety? Seeing none.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, yeah, just real quickly, thank you. I'm just wondering if you could comment on the different, while we're going with bank loan on something like the admin building and the sheriff's capital reserve on the others. And that's a question that will recur in the future when you're reporting. If you could just comment on the decision-making process that gets us to the bank loan as opposed to another funding source. And so I won't repeat that question, but if you could note that when you're going forward, when we're talking about loans. Thank you.
Yeah, so on the bank loan situation, we talked about the centralized phone system and the software. Those are going to be your typical bank loans that we can just basically solicit proposals from banks that here within the county. They're going to be the easiest option. They don't require us to go to the LGC. They don't require us to bring in bond counsel. They're going to be the cheapest way for us to go out and to get a loan and to spread that cost out over multiple years instead of trying to tackle it all in 1 year. On the sheriff's administrative building, technically, when I say a bank loan, that's a bond. But when we talk about the term bond, we're talking multiple millions of dollars, very similar to what we're going to discuss next Monday with the lobs involving A.G. Cox Middle School. So in that case, when you're looking at a $5.5 million project, it could be closer to 6 by the time you actually put all the pieces together. It makes more sense for us to go out into the larger bond market than it would be to just go get a local loan from here within the town. So this way it allows us to spread that cost out even further because as of right now, there's no way for us to be able to tackle a $6 million project directly out of fund balance or out of operating funds. On the sheriff's capital reserve, that's the reserve that you all created when we look at our federal inmates. Each year when we finish our audit, we are tasked to come back to you with a calculation of how much over budget we were on that revenue. And if you want to move that money into the reserve was designed to tackle capital improvement items. So we try to make sure that those projects that are eligible for the capital reserve are on the CIP. And then there's a step-by-step process. So if we do come to you and say, we want to use the sheriff's capital reserve for a project, then you all will have to take that additional step to approve it. And so you have the option of using that as a funding source or regular operating revenues. So right now, from a financial standpoint, we try to look at all the different buckets to make money stretch as far as it will go. And so that's why at this point, we recommend which route that we recommend.
Thank you very much.
And I don't see any other hands.
All right. And again, to Commissioner Albright's question, you may pick a source today as approving the starting point of the CIP. By the time we get in budget, we may end up going down a totally different route.
Mary Perkins Williams now has a hand up. Mary Perkins Williams now has a hand up.
I think
all right, I was trying to unmute myself or whatever. Brian, you said something about the federal prisoners for the sheriff. I didn't think we know when we were going to get when we were going to have federal prison. How do you know when to budget based these numbers based on how many prisoners we get?
So Commissioner Perkins Williams, every year when we do the budget, we do sit down with the detention folks and we go over their numbers. We have, in essence, a calculation based on a predetermined amount of inmates because we do not know how many inmates we are going to get. We typically do get more than the allotment But from a budgeting standpoint, it's better to set that number at a predetermined spot than to anticipate what you may get just depending on crime. COVID had an impact on the number of inmates that we received, but typically that number is less than what we typically do receive. And that's what we use in calculating how much we are above budget that's available for the reserve as we complete our audit. And as Scott alluded earlier in the meeting, we do plan to present the audit in the mid-February meeting. And at that point in time, we will know to the penny how much we were above or at budget on that revenue, and then what steps we can take forward on that reserve.
Brian, let me add to that. So on the federal inmates, the sheriff's office budgets to have on average 35 inmates. So where the capital reserve dollars come in for the sheriff's office, that 35 inmates might create $1 million in revenue that helps go against the overall detention center budget. It's really not, we're not making money per se. The general fund is still, as I keep saying every year, paying for more than the far majority of all the expenses. Where the sheriff's capital reserve fund comes into play is that when they have more than the 35, if that is the budgeted number, let's say on average they had 50 inmates in the current year. So there would then be excess revenue above and beyond the 35 that then, once the audit is presented, like Brian's talking about, will come before you on the 15th, we will know that as of June 30th of last year, how much, hopefully how much excess federal inmate revenue they have, and that goes in that fund. And I guess to be totally transparent in the matter, if you look on the slide, again, we have the detention center air handling units, which is the third phase of these units to go in place at 600,000. Then you talked about the boilers, then you talked about the chillers. That is, from our perspective as management team and staff, we're saying that we propose the best use of those dollars, those excess dollars, is to meet these needs at the detention center for these capital projects. The sheriff has stood before you. I can't speak for her, but I can speak what she said in the past. She doesn't necessarily agree that her excess dollars should be used on these type of capital projects. But if they're not, then there's even more general fund dollars that have to come from somewhere to pay for these projects. She may want to use those dollars to buy vehicles or to replace bulletproof vests or to do radios or so on and so forth. But again, if they were truly, if the dollars they were earning were truly above and beyond any general fund dollars overall that was paying for the detention center, I think she'd have a stronger argument. But these are costs that are occurring that, again, from a cost center that does not pay for itself.
All right, thank you.
So we will move on to economic and physical development. In this category, we only have one project. This is our inspection project, inspections permitting software. We had a system in place since 2009, and we feel that it is time to upgrade and replace that system. That was something that is going to be more departmentally friendly and end user friendly with the public. This is a $750,000 project. And from a bank loan standpoint, we would probably wrap this in together with the replacement of the phone system and do one software type bank loan, hopefully from a bank here and within the county. But this would give us a greater ability. And being it's a 2009 system, it's probably time for us to take a hard look at some type of upgrade or replacement of what we have in place, especially as inspections have increased even during COVID. We want to make sure that our end users are having a smooth process as we go through the inspections process. Any questions on this? Moving to human services. Went too fast. Here we go. This is a project that you've seen before. This is the medical records area. A couple of years ago, we moved our software into the Epic model. By doing that, it freed up space within the health department. And the folks at the health department would like to use that space since it's available to renovate it into usable office space. We've decided this year to look at it in two parts, one part for 21-22 for $150,000, another part for 22-23 for $175,000. But this is one of those rare cases where we do have the space available. We just need to upfit this particular area. And this has been an area that, as we have moved into the budget, as numbers have tightened, that has been cut. So this will be another look at this project to see if we can move it forward. Our next project in human services, which is actually in our second year, 22-23, is a replacement of our mobile dental safari unit. I'm sure you guys have seen this unit around the county, especially at our schools. But this, as it stands today, is a 23-year-old vehicle. So we are looking ahead and planning and trying to find the best route to look at replacing it moving forward in 22-23. This is a particular case where there is some revenue opportunity if we can get it out. COVID has put a hit on this particular operation, as it's hard to see school kids when school's not in session, but hopefully in those future years, we will be back to some sense of normal, and this will be running back at full steam. We do receive Medicaid cost study revenue. And that may be a potential source. That's why you do see on your list where it says current revenue / fund balance. Technically, when we do receive our Medicaid cost study money, it is restricted fund balance. There's a small list of items that's available for spending, and this being one. So that may be a potential source to help us alleviate the need on the general fund. Next is our Human Services Center expansion study. This is another study that we want to take a hard look at over at our Human Services building to see what steps that we can take to hopefully consolidate more of our DSS staff in one place and not have them in two locations. The study helps us to determine the best use of money before we come back to you with a larger dollar amount. This will probably be somewhere in the ballpark close to the Sheriff's Administration building in terms of cost. So we want to make sure that we come back to you with a good solid number before we move forward on any type of expansion with DSS over at the Human Services Center. Any questions on Human Services? If you do look in your packet, DSS has provided you with some photographs of their space issues currently at the Human Services and at this facility here at the county office building. It's kind of a justification of their need to move this study forward to look for more space.
I would like, not necessarily now, but later in another meeting, hear a report on the mobile dental lab for the schools. We haven't heard from that in a long time. I don't even know how many students we've served and are serving and that sort of thing, because I was so much in favor of it when we started it, and I hope it's still going on kind of gangbusters. So maybe somebody can come back with that at another meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward. We will set something up.
Thank you.
So next on our project list is our cultural and recreation. This primarily is one you've heard before. You've heard some good news here recently on this project as well. It is not directly reflected on our CIP in line with the recent news that you've heard. So I'll still give you the spill on the project, but this is the gymnasium at the Alice Keene District Park. This first year is looking at planning dollars to move this project forward from an engineering and planning standpoint. And the 2 years that you have on here, the 23, 24, 25, and 24 and 25, those dollars actually add up to the recent news that we have heard that we are moving this forward as a special needs project through FEMA. That total project was roughly 17 million, with $4.5 million coming as a local match. from the county. We're hoping to get some of that local match funded through the state to help ease some of our burden. We were able to get the project submitted in time in January. We had a review of the project with the state emergency management folks. They gave us a very positive rating, and then they kicked it up to FEMA. And I believe there's going to be a June timeframe when we should hear back some feedback from FEMA on whether or not this is a project they would like to fund. So as it sits in your CIP, it is more of your standard gymnasium. Even though we have moved this forward as a special needs gymnasium through FEMA, but we're hoping to use some of the same money that we have here in the CIP to fund the FEMA portion if we are awarded the project.
Brian,
And I think James is on the line, and Scott may have some more comments if you have any specific questions.
yeah, Brian, I was going to ask maybe if the chairwoman would allow James or Alice to give a brief update where we are in the process. I think Brian alluded to some of the review process as we move forward. If we could just give them a moment just to tell us where we are. It is a large dollar project, so just want you to hear where we're at.
Yes, please do.
Yes, good morning, Chairwoman and members of the board. Just real quickly, and Alice is on the line too. I'm sure she'll hit a point if I miss something. We have moved forward with number one, the current CIP has the scaled down version. Tim Corley, Alice and I went over to Greene County last year and pretty much did a tour of their current facility. This was not a special medical needs shelter, but it was the gymnasium. So that's kind of what the current alignment that Brian just went over shows us. During the past few months, we've had a great opportunity. We listened to the board directed us to look for other revenue sources, and we think we found something that really helps us marry something that's very much needed here in our community. That's a special medical needs shelter. So we have just now submitted to FEMA as of last Thursday a request for a building resilient infrastructure and communities grant through FEMA to help marry both the gymnasium and the special medical needs shelter into one very substantial and versatile building out at the Alice F. King Park. So we feel like this works real well with the funding that's currently recommended, and certainly if we get this funding, we may need to come back with you and talk about the timing. We're hopeful we get funding in June. We'll have about 3 years to expend those funds. But right now, things are looking favorable, and we'll certainly be bringing that back to you. So welcome any questions you might have of Alice or me.
Commissioner Huggins, may I ask?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Brian, thanks for presenting on this. The 250 that we've got in this year's proposed budget, that's for what's that actually going to go to? And forgive me, when I think I'm one of the ones that requested that we look at other revenue sources. When I'm hearing the I guess the bigger upfit and the bigger plan, I'm still seeing that it's a pretty significant ask for coming from the county. It's still in the $4 million, and I guess at least in my view, when I was thinking of additional funding sources, I wasn't necessarily thinking that we would expand the project to bootstrap it onto something bigger. I was thinking of ways that we could reduce the overall burden on the county, seeing as how we have tremendous needs in other areas. And I think some questions have been raised as to whether or not a gymnasium ought to be at the top of the priorities where it's situated, and accessibility with cars and things of that nature. So I guess I still have a number of questions about the project and whether or not we're in a place where we want to commit to spending $4 million on it. But I guess just, Brian, if you could go over what this 250 is for, and then if it is a slope to expending $4.5 million if we get the grant from FEMA, what that's looking for our commission 2 to 3 years out in terms of what we're committing to.
So on the 250,000, this may actually be more of a Tim question from the engineering side, but this is to get our our planning underway if we are in the event that we are going to move forward with the project with FEMA. And I do want to add that the 4.3, I believe, is the actual match. We are hoping that the state will kick in some of their dollars to help lower that amount. So I don't foresee it being a whole 4.3 if we are awarded the project, because I think the state wants to get that FEMA money pumping through the state, because we were more ready than the other projects. So I think the state sees that as very favorable. So I don't think it'll be 4.3, but at this point, I can't tell you if the state's going to pay half or a third. I doubt they'll pay all, but I think we'll have to make that decision if we are awarded that grant.
So the 250 is I guess seen as a necessary expenditure to get us to that next question.
Well, part of the philosophy of the years past was that the board was approving the planning and design dollars to go ahead and do that, to have those in place so you could seek grant funding from other sources. What planning has done is gone after a much larger federal grant, but it's along the same line of thought. You were advancing the project even before the large federal BRIC grant came into play, to be able to start the process toward moving toward it, thinking that if we had firmer plans and design and so forth in hand, it might be easier then to land that grant funding.
Okay, and then I guess maybe a more appropriate time that I can raise this again, but also there are a number of recreation things not directly related, but we're looking at crumbling, the crumbling track and some other community areas where EBA which is used by the community, and some other places where we're looking to try to get more recreation activities in the community, and wondering if we're getting our best bang for our buck here. So that's just my continued question on this project. If the gymnasium is touching as many people as we can, or is that maybe is it a priority for the community? And so that's just my question, and I'll raise it later.
And to add to that, I think the discussion was that, sometimes we need a large facility for disaster time when we cannot use the schools. So that was that helped us to really talk about and push this along as a need and as kind of a priority. So in order to get us ready, we had to have some planning, and that I believe that 250 was to get us going so that we would be able to, as you said, to apply for the grant.
That's a good point, because as we open various shelters in the schools throughout Pitt County, then we get to the point where, say, a hurricane has came, people are sheltering, and now the sun's back out, schools want to open, yet these people aren't able to quite move back into their homes or apartments or whatnot. We need a place where we can get them out of the schools so the schools can fully utilize the schools for school purposes. This shelter was going to be that consolidation point. That would be a non-school facility that we could consolidate 2 or 3 shelters into one location and then move on.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I was going to say Tim had popped on. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Not necessarily. Again, the 250,000 was really a plan to get the plans ready. Most of the grant opportunities and monies that are available, like Scott said, do like to have those kind of shovel ready as far as the plans. So that was the intent there, was just to get the plans prepared and allow us to maybe even apply for additional grants. I believe this grant that James and Alice and I have been working on kind of popped up. This was on the CIP last year, and we kind of backed off of it because of the COVID issues. And so we are kind of in a different place as relates to where we were last year as far as the grant goes. But I still think it'll give us an opportunity to discover as we go along with the decision on the grant, also kind of where we want to go with the plan as far as if we want to continue down this path of the special needs or if the grants don't work out, maybe look at just a gymnasium type construction. Obviously with the special needs component, that certainly expands the scope of the project as far as what it needs to have at the facility, and in turn, the cost goes up. So a lot of things at play here, and James may want to expand even further on that, but I'll stop there.
And Commissioner McLaughlin has a hand up.
Commissioner McLaughlin? Commissioner McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes. Go ahead.
As alluded to, James, I think, brought it up very eloquently. The FEMA need, the special needs, the recreational facilities, the medical needs in our community, especially as it relates to the Hispanic and community, and underserved community. I think this will bring strong measures to getting grant money. And certainly we've been working on this project for a long time. I think that this project would in turn bring a lot to this community in what it's going to do for the total population. So if we can continue to reach out for grant monies, and with the necessary concerns that we're going to use this building for, I think that it may be a good project moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other hands up? Are there other hands up?
Not that I see.
All right. Continue on.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I just want to point out, part of the CIP process is to have these projects in place. So if grant opportunities do come up, that we can jump on them. And that just helps our case, because we're not creating a grant. We're not chasing grants. We have needs, and the grants help to fund those needs. So I think this was a perfect scenario, having this already on the CIP, and then the grant popped up and we were able to just move into it pretty seamlessly.
Absolutely.
Our next group is our environmental protection. This is primarily all at the solid waste with John Demery and his projects. Most of these projects are going to be equipment based that you have probably heard in some form or fashion in the past. But our first one is our ongoing annual asphalt replacement at our convenience sites. As you know, we have 14 convenience sites. They get quite a bit of traffic, and that traffic beats up the asphalt and the grounds over there. So we have $150,000 for next fiscal year. We've identified Ayton, Falkland, Stokes, and Bethel as our four particular sites that we like to spend $150,000 on. That doesn't mean that next year we won't have a fifth or sixth, just depending on how wear and tear and operations and revenues look. But these are the four areas that we're looking at working on next year from a convenient site standpoint. Next, we have a dozer at the landfill. This would replace a 1992 model. So to get that amount of years out of one model is pretty impressive, but it is probably time that we look at replacing this one.
Brian, if you might want to pause, Chairwoman, we have a hand up for Commissioner Nunley, and then hand up Commissioner Perkins-Williams.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner Nunley?
Madam Chair, I can wait until the end of the presentation. That's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Perkins-Williams?
Yes, I wanted to ask about when you started talking about the waste site, I'm wondering how far it is, because I used the one over by Lowe's on 10th Street, and the hose when you're driving up there is tremendous. I don't know where the site stops and where the highway starts, but the hose are just grand over there.
Commissioner, are you referring to the port terminal site?
Yes, I think that's what y'all call it over there, across from Lowe's, that street over across from Lowe's on 10th Street.
Yes, ma'am. So that street that runs down there to the site is an NCDOT street. That road is in very poor shape. I actually utilize that facility as well. It would help. We've asked DOT in the past to go in there and help us with that. It would probably help if the commissioners would maybe put a word in as well with them to see if that road could be fixed at their next round of asphalt work. The facility actually starts, as you turn in the drive, and that site as well does need some work. We've tried to prioritize all these convenient sites. They've been, a lot of them need work. We recognize that. So we're going to try to address it in a systematic way of trying to get the ones that need the most repair first. And you'll see that reflected in the CIP as far as future years. Our plans are to try to get all these sites back up to a good condition, where we don't have to worry about them for quite a while. You may have, if anybody has seen the Winterville site, that's kind of our goal. We went in there and kind of redid that site. It looks very good, and hopefully will be good for many years to come. We're also replacing a lot of the structures that the site attendants stay at. A lot of those are starting to fall down and have been there for a long time. And so we're also doing that as part of this CIP item.
Okay, I know the one that I'm talking about. The door is facing the river, and everybody is coming up behind him. So if it's rain, he can't see anybody coming up. It's that, I don't know. It's a bad place. But I appreciate you doing the one in Bethel too, because I've used that one. Depending on where I'm going, I take my trash. Thank you. You said it was Aiden and what else?
Aiden, Falkland, Stokes, and Bethel.
Okay. Thank you.
And I also want to point out, as we move into environmental protection of the solid waste, that all the funding for this is separate than the funding in the general fund. As you know, they have their own household fee, they have tipping fees. So there's a whole different set of revenues than we have previously discussed as part of our CIP presentation today.
Well, I appreciate it, because I've gone to two of those other ones too, and the hose are bad. I don't understand the hose when you got to drive over. It really make your car, tear up your car and stuff and knock it out of balance. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
John Demery has his hand up.
I'd like to comment. This year we're supposed to work on Port Terminal, Pactolus, and Welcome, I believe. And there might be one more that Farmville, I think. I don't have it right in front of me. Those are the ones we're working on right now. The house at Port Terminal is going to be replaced. The house at Welcome is scheduled to be replaced, and Bethel as well. So those are on this year's budget that we're working on.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, then we will continue on. Our third environmental protection solid waste project is the replacement of a rubber tire loader. We're going to replace the oldest one over at the facility. And then in 23-24, we will probably be back to replace an additional loader to keep our loaders up to date. John, what year is the one that you're looking to replace?
It is it's our oldest one, and it is don't hold me to this, but I think it's about 5 years old, going on 5 or 6 years old.
Thank you. Our fourth project is the replacement of is actually the purchase of new roll-off trucks at the solid waste site. The roll-off trucks are at the landfill site are probably the workhorse vehicles of solid waste. And that's why you will see on the CIP that we have them up next year, and then we have 2 additional years over the next 5-year period that we would like to use these trucks for. But these trucks move When you go to convenient sites, these are the trucks that are picking up the containers and bringing them back to the facilities to be sorted out, depending on what type of materials that they're bringing. And also, we're going to try to take advantage. Volkswagen has a grant opportunity out there, and we're going to try to take advantage of that to help alleviate some of these costs so that we don't have to use as much current revenue in the solid waste fund to fund these projects. Next is our yard jockeys. These are the vehicles that move parts and pieces and equipment around at the landfill. We are looking to replace those. We'd like to replace our 2001 model, and this should put us back at more smoother facility efficiency at the facility. And then our last project is actually, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but we just wanted to go ahead and put it on the CIP. This is a rubber tire excavator. We do have it out in our future years, within the next 5 years, at $250,000. So that being said, that's all of our projects at solid waste. Are there any solid waste related questions?
Yes, Brian, this is Commissioner Nunley. Madam Chair, may I ask?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian, we've been in discussions about getting containers at the convenient sites for glass recycling. I'm assuming that because it's not on the CIP, that the cost of that is under $100,000, and maybe John can comment on that, or if it's in the general fund request. But I just want to make sure that we're accounting for that that need in the community.
So before John jumps in, you slipped in there general fund. I just want to clarify that it's not part of the general fund. Yeah. So I believe John and Tim are working on that more ASAP the next future fiscal year and the next 5 years. And that's why it's not listed on this list, but I'm going to let them explain to you that a little bit more.
We were waiting. I got an email last Wednesday or Thursday from the Glass Foundation that we applied for some money to purchase some containers. They were meeting Friday. I am hoping to hear something today about that. And then depending on how much funding we get during the budget, I will put in a recommendation to purchase additional containers. The containers are roughly about $4,000 or $5,000 a piece. Depending on my budget this year, I might be able to buy a few too this year, and hopefully in July we should be able to have all our sites completely. All of them would have a glass container at each site. But I'm waiting on the grant. I can't spend any money or they won't reimburse us.
John, how many actual containers did you apply for on the grant?
I applied for 14 containers for all 14 sites.
And we also, just as an FYI, we also reached out to the city. I know there's been some talk, asked them if they were interested in having a container placed on any site within the city. The Public Works facility was one that we thought might be a good location, but they declined that as well, just as FYI.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, continue on, sir.
Do we have any other hands or questions? Okay. So as Commissioner Albright asked earlier about our funding, this is a list of our funding sources, as you can see. And we do look at each one of these to analyze how can we maximize to get the most bang for our buck. We look at our unrestricted revenues. Not all revenues that we have available I can use on capital. So anything that's unrestricted, we like to consider that. Grant funding. If a department wants to move a project up, there's no better way than to find a grant. If there's a grant, especially if there's no match, that definitely helps us to move that project along and even help to move it up in the CIP, as in the case of the special needs gymnasium Donations are always welcome. Fund balance is an opportunity that we have. You all have set a fund balance percentage. Currently, we do have the ability to look at fund balance as a source above that percentage. Just keep in mind as we move through the pandemic, how important fund balance may be just to have in the event that there's a particular revenue that does take a hit as we move forward. We did talk on our other capital reserves that we have set up. And we did actually go into a slight conversation on the difference between traditional bank loans and our larger limited obligation. And then of course, if we do, if we want to go out for a larger sum of money, particular in certain areas, the general obligation bond is always an option. However, if we go down that option, we will have to go out with a voter referendum to get voter approval before we move forward with the bond. So we take all of those in consideration when we're deciding which categories to place which projects into on the funding side, and whether or not to even recommend it based on the funding. So it's just as much can we afford the project as in the project itself being on the capital improvement plan that we take in consideration.
Brian, on the general obligation bond, the financing, as I recall, that compared to the LOBs or the limited obligation bond, the general, which is voter, like you said, it's on the ballot, it's voter approved, typically tends to be a slightly lower interest rate because it does require the voters to back that via vote, correct?
Right. You will probably receive a lower interest rate because it's a more attractive form of borrowing money because you do have the voter backing behind you. You also, the voters are backing the ability to pledge the full faith and credit of our property tax to pay that loan in the event that we are short or dare I say even on default, we would have the ability to increase the tax rate to make that loan payment. So that does trigger typically a lower interest rate.
Thank you.
So at this point, before we jump into Pitt County Schools, who I think has joined our call, I will entertain any last questions about the Pitt County projects before I turn it over to Dr. Linker to go more into depth. And I think at this point, I stop sharing and he starts sharing, but we will figure out the technical to make this work out. So are there any last questions?
Brian, there is the not recommended section on the agenda. Is that for later on, or are you doing that now?
Yeah, that's actually, it's in the presentation after the school system and the Pitt Community College. We'll jump back into that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. While we're waiting for Pitt County to get on, we don't have, are they ready, Brian?
I can see Dr. Linker. He just, as I say that, he just stepped away.
Okay.
He's back.
I'm back.
I think if he unmutes, he should be able to take over. I think Kyle can have him set up to share his screen or his staff screen, however they're going to do it.
Okay. And then I don't see a break in here, but while we're waiting for him, do we want to take a break or anything?
If you desire to do that, we could do that and come back in 5 minutes, or we can
Okay.
straight on.
All right. Let's come back for 5 minutes.
Okay, so 10:15?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.